My first Tinder experience ended with him in jail. This story isn't as extreme as some others I've read here, but when I came across this subreddit, I knew I had to share what happened. 3 years ago, I decided to try Tinder for the first time. I was 25, and while most women my age had already used dating apps, I hadn't been single since I was 17. I met my ex back in high school, and 6 years later, we were married with a child. At first, life seemed good, but over time, things fell apart. He grew bitter and resentful toward me and the family we had built. I tried to hold our marriage together, but the abuse became more frequent and more intense. Eventually, I packed up our baby and fled in the middle of the night. My heart was broken, and my mind was scarred. It was one of the hardest things I've ever done. A few months later, I had a new home, a new job, and a slowly rebuilding sense of self. I was healing, but I was also lonely. With shared custody, my weekends were often quiet, and I found myself craving connection. I wasn't looking for another relationship, just some lighthearted human contact. So, I downloaded Tinder. It was exciting, new, and a little intimidating. After so much emotional pain, it felt strange, but good to receive attention again. My confidence was low, so the compliments and validation were addictive. Deep down, I knew it wasn't the healthiest coping mechanism, but I just wanted to feel wanted again. That's when I met Derek. He seemed like a regular guy, nice enough, not too flashy. He was cute, but not so much that I felt insecure. We shared some interests: craft beer, hiking, and a similar sense of humor. Eventually, we decided to meet at a local restaurant. I was nervous. It was my first date in 8 years. I put on my best dress, did my makeup, and headed out. My palms were sweaty as I waited. When he arrived, things were a little awkward at first, but once we ordered drinks, conversation started to flow. A bit of alcohol helped us relax, and by the end of the night, we were laughing easily. We joked about karaoke across town. He said he hated it. I told him I loved it. I've always enjoyed singing, even if I'm no professional. So, after some playful convincing, we decided to go. The night turned wild. We sang, took shots, flirted, and laughed. It was the kind of carefree fun I hadn't had in years. We ended up in his truck, making out, hearts racing. It was exactly the escape I needed. After that, we texted regularly and set up another date. I didn't feel emotionally attached, but I enjoyed his company. It felt safe because I wasn't invested. For our second date, we planned to go tubing down a river in town. We parked his orange truck at the end of the river and drove my truck upstream. He zipped both our keys into a pocket in his shorts, planning to drop me at my truck afterward. The day was perfect: warm sun, cool water, and laughter as we floated downstream. But when we got to the end, his face fell. "Your key is gone," he said. I thought he was joking, but he wasn't. My heart sank. I'd made the mistake of bringing my only truck key. The river was long, and we'd stopped several times along the way. He offered to drive me home, and we agreed to meet the next day to search for it. The following afternoon, we combed the river together, retracing our steps, diving into cold water again and again. Finally, just before sunset, he spotted something glinting underwater. It was my key. We were shocked and thrilled. To celebrate, he invited me back to his place for a drink. We drove down a long wooded driveway to a secluded trailer. He said he was renting a room from an older couple who were away. Inside, the place was a mess. Dirty dishes everywhere, cluttered counters. His room wasn't much better. Clothes on the floor, a mattress with no frame, snacks in a plastic bin, and warm beer. We ended up sleeping together, but afterward, I felt uneasy. The fun spark I'd felt before was gone. I decided that would be our last date. A week passed with minimal texting. Then, one Saturday, my friends and I planned a karaoke night. Out of nowhere, Derek texted, "Are you going to karaoke tonight?" I replied that I was. He said he'd be there too, with a date. I thanked him for letting me know, and told him I hoped he had a good night. Later at the bar, I spotted him a few booths away. He waved enthusiastically, grinning. I awkwardly waved back. I didn't want to make things weird for him or his date. A couple hours later, he and his date stumbled over to our table, both clearly drunk. He introduced her as Kate and sat beside me, pulling her down next to him. The smell of alcohol was strong. Kate seemed nice, but was slurring her words, telling us random stories. Then under the table, I felt Derek's hand on my thigh. His date was right there. Shocked, I quickly pushed his hand away and went to get another drink. When I looked back, he was watching me. Soon after, Kate's taxi arrived. They kissed goodbye, and Derek stayed behind. His mood darkened immediately. He slung his arm around me, slurring compliments. I froze. When he got up for another beer, my friends and I agreed to leave early. We even planned a discreet exit. The girls and I would go to the restroom and slip out the back, while our male friend distracted him. When we returned, Derek was swaying, spilling beer on himself. We told him we were heading home, but he insisted on coming with me. I told him I couldn't. My child was at home with a sitter. That wasn't true, but I needed an excuse. He refused a taxi and said he'd sleep in his truck instead. We left him there and walked out the back door. The night air felt like relief. As we made our way to the hotel where my friends were staying, my phone started ringing. Derek. I ignored it, but he left a voicemail. When I played it, his voice was confused, slurred. "Where are you guys? I thought we were hanging out." We laughed nervously and kept walking, until he called again. Another voicemail. This time, his tone had changed. He said he loved me and didn't understand why I'd left. The way he said, "I love you," sent chills down my spine. We reached the hotel, and my friend offered to drive me home. As she grabbed her keys, my phone rang again, another voicemail. This time, Derek's voice was angry, volatile. He said he still loved me but was furious that I'd left him. His words slurred into rage. Then came the final line, the one that froze me. "You know, I'm really starting to hate you." A cold wave ran through me. I was grateful that this side of him hadn't occurred earlier, when we were alone at his remote trailer. When I finally got home, I felt drained. His behavior had reminded me too much of my ex. The same volatility, the same unpredictable switch from affection to anger. Then, through my window, I saw headlights. My blood ran cold. It was Derek's orange truck. He'd found my house. And that was only the beginning. I froze, staring through the curtain. My heart pounded so hard I could feel it in my throat. How did he even find me? When he dropped me off that one time, I'd never given him my exact address. But I suddenly remembered. I'd left a package on the porch that night, and my house number was printed right on it. He must have seen it. My mind was racing. Derek had been too drunk to even stand when we left him at the bar. So how had he managed to drive across town? The thought of him behind the wheel in that condition made my stomach turn. His truck idled at the curb for a while before the headlights went out. The darkness that followed made everything worse. I crouched low beneath the window, terrified he might get out. Every sound in the house felt louder. The hum of the fridge, the creak of the floor under my feet. After several minutes that felt like hours, I heard his truck door open, my breath caught. He stumbled out, shouting my name. "Why'd you leave me?" he slurred, voice echoing down the quiet street. "I just want to talk." I didn't move. I didn't answer. The baby was asleep and I was petrified he'd come to the door and start banging. He paced outside, mumbling and ranting. I could hear fragments of his words through the window, something about how I owed him and how I'd led him on. Then came a loud thud. He'd slammed his hand against my front door. I jumped and instinctively reached for my phone to call the police. My hands were shaking so badly I nearly dropped it. When the dispatcher answered, I whispered what was happening, terrified he might hear me through the door. She told me to stay on the line and stay quiet. Outside, Derek continued to shout, alternating between angry and pitiful. "I love you," he yelled, before pounding on the door again. "Why are you doing this to me?" The sound of sirens in the distance felt like salvation. He must have heard them too, because suddenly his voice stopped. Moments later, I saw him stumble back toward his truck. The headlights flicked on and he sped off into the night, barely able to stay in his lane. 2 police cars pulled up a minute later. I met the officers at the door, still trembling. I told them everything. How drunk he'd been, the voicemails, the stalking, and that he had driven to my home while intoxicated. They assured me I did the right thing calling them. One officer left to search for his truck, while the other stayed to take my statement. I played the voicemails for them, each one slurred, erratic, and increasingly aggressive. About 20 minutes later, the first officer radioed back. They'd found Derek's truck in a ditch a few miles from my house. He had apparently tried to drive away, but lost control and crashed. Thankfully, no one else was hurt. He was taken into custody for driving under the influence and trespassing. When I hung up with the police that night, I finally let myself cry. The adrenaline drained out of me all at once. I'd escaped one abusive relationship, only to nearly walk into another. In the days that followed, Derek tried to contact me again, apologizing, begging me to drop the charges, promising that he just wanted to make things right. But I blocked his number and changed mine. I even replaced my locks, just to be safe. It took time, but eventually the fear began to fade. I learned a hard lesson about how quickly something that seems harmless can turn dangerous. For a while, I blamed myself for ignoring the early warning signs. The possessiveness, the boundary crossing, the hand on my leg in front of his date. But I've since realized none of it was my fault. I'd just met someone who hid his darkness behind charm until he couldn't anymore. It's been 3 years since then. Derek ended up serving time for the DUI, and I never heard from him again after his release. Looking back, I'm grateful I trusted my instincts that night. If I hadn't left the bar when I did, if I'd let him come inside, things could have ended very differently. That was my first Tinder experience, and my last.